I happen to like this.
It says it actually has Amok on there.
I am Emil Amok. It's on my driver's license. This is the pre-show jam. Welcome
You don't
to
want to use that license when you're in Manila.
welcome to the pre-show jam. I
You
figured,
might get shot.
oh, no. Hey,
Oh, you're impervious to bullets the way that Mr. Trump and Pence are impervious to COVID-19, right?
you know, I am wearing my. You can't see this unless you're on Zoom or unless you're on Facebook Live. We are live right now on Facebook Live. Emil Amok's Takeout is live. The Asian Pacific American Heritage Month special live. I've got my Sulu shirt on. I'm up here in space. Daniel Phil Gonzalez, Asian American Studies professor, joins me, and you're very prompt. I said be here at 10:30, and you're here, and I applaud you, Daniel Phil Gonzalez, defeating the concept of Filipino.
Oh,
And
had to bring that up, huh?
well,
that means that I'm not being authentic, man.
no,
I'm gonna get accused of being a fake Filipino because I was on time.
you were authentic. You're authentic. And no, and that's why we love you, and that's why the people who have taken your classes at San Francisco State, the legions of people, applaud you and think you're wonderful.
Well, when you stay on the same job for 50 years, legions are a great probability, not a mere possibility.
Well, no, this is an incredible thing, and we can talk about it during the pre-show as well as during the actual show. And excuse me, I do mean this. I thought, well, I've got to set up Facebook Live, and you can see that if you go to Facebook, you'll see that we're slightly delayed. Don't try to sync up our lips with what you hear on Facebook if you are on the Zoom page. But people who are just looking at us on Facebook will see that I have devoted a lot of time for any kind of screw up because the party begins at 11, but I said that I sent out the invite for early because I just didn't know if we would be if we'd have any kind of technical glitch. So I thought,
well, I'm not able to see myself on the inset. I had that same problem yesterday.
Yeah.
But you can see me.
I don't see you actually.
Okay, that's what we need to check on. My camera is working. I can see myself on my camera.
See, I
don't have any specialized background up.
Yeah, we don't need a specialized background. Just make sure you wear pants. I'm wearing the above screen.
Oh, busted again, man.
This is the above screen no pants look for me. I just think that I thought for our Olympia party we would make sure that we would give people the behind the scenes experience, and for me that means the ultimate in social distancing. Here I am I'm using the Zoom provided social distancing virtual backdrop. I'm wearing my Sulu shirt, so I look like prominent Asian.
Yeah. I don't know. It looked like an ordinary red freaking zip up.
Oh no, but look, I have a pocket here. See, I have an Asian American pocket on the shoulder because that's so that we can reach. No, okay, that's a bad joke.
No, that just so you can scratch your armpit.
Yeah, no, I don't. It's a secret passageway. No, I am just enamored with the Zoom format, and now I'm enamored with the Zoom to Facebook Live. We had one person come in and they dropped out. They said, "I'm not participating.
I'm not watching this stuff. They're talking about armpits."
I'm not.
Listen, I don't know what's going on with my. I can see myself on cam, but I cannot see myself on the inset, which means you cannot see me. Now that might work out well.
I can't see. Well, thank you. small favors we accept, at every turn. Now that's good. You're the blacked out Daniel Phil Gonzalez.
That's right.
Um,
That's right. Guess what he looks like? And
yeah.
there are federal posters at the local USPS office.
Yeah. Hey, it's funny. We had a couple people join us on Facebook Live, and now they've dropped out. They said, "This is an Asian Pacific American Heritage Month celebration." You betcha it is. This is
Yeah.
Asian Pacific American Heritage Month.
Well, I guess you better start talking about that, even though I'm in the dark.
No, that's all right. Well, look, I know what you look like, Dan, and I know that the black box is an improvement. I know it is. So I'm fine. As they say, and you teach in college, higher ed. I know that I know what they say that it is an improvement. I'm down with this. I'm down with this. I'm ready. So Dan, I'm going to get into this when other people join us and when we start officially at 11 o'clock. But I wanted to give people this behind the scenes look at what it really means to be putting on something like this. It's not easy. I'm enamored with Zoom. Everyone's Zooming, right? This is the way to reach out and touch someone in the modern COVID period, right? Right? Dan?
Yeah,
You're there. Yeah.
I am, but I'm trying to concentrate on. I want to get this thing working because I have to have it for other Zoom purposes.
Yes. Okay. Get it working. You can listen. Just make
But
sure
it says that there's two
hallelujah.
participants. It says there's two participants on. Why don't you ask them if they're live, what they want to talk about?
Oh no, one is me and one is you.
Oh, that's it. We're the only two people on. Okay. So
Dan, that is a trade secret not to reveal in the pre-show.
But you did that.
We're not. Oh, I did that. Okay. Oh, look, we're still in the pre-show. Fix your camera, Dan. If people are watching on Facebook Live, I hope they are. It's actually kind of it's interesting. People want to see the behind the scenes of the whole process.
Oh yeah. How does it get done?
And we're giving them the warts and all picture. I think we are definitely giving them the warts and all picture of how to put something like this on. But like you said, I do it because I've been thinking about Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. Oh, hey, we have Christopher Castro is here. And as people join, hello, Chris. People join.
Hi, Chris.
We will. Hi, Chris.
Hey, I'm in the closet right now, so you can't see me.
Yeah, I'm with Daniel Phil Gonzalez, and we are preparing. This is the pre-show. It's sort of like you have the Super Bowl, and they have like the big before you get to the game. There's like 3 hours of programming. So before you get to Emil Amok's Takeout,
it's 3 hours of commercials, man. Yeah.
3 hours, and it's a commercial for Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. Christopher Castro is joining us, and that's all right. You can mute your mic and just sit back and relax. He's with the Filipino American National Historical Society Museum, one of the core members there. Daniel Phil Gonzalez is with the Asian American Studies Department at San Francisco State, which is interesting. It was the first, you correct me if I'm wrong here, if I give you more credit than you can, but it was the first Asian American Studies Department in the United States?
Yeah, there are. Yes, I would say that's true. If you want to say department, that is true. There's always arguments about whether or not somebody else had a class or a couple of classes, but they didn't constitute a department. So as per your question, that's true. We were also the first school of ethnic studies that had 4 separate departments. So we actually had 4 separate areas that had departmental status from the start.
And this is one of the things that's interesting, because I remember growing up, I was younger, not college age, but looking up at what was happening. I went to school in San Francisco at Lowell High School, which is down the block from San Francisco State. And at San Francisco State, I saw what was going on with the student strike, and there was some I don't know if you can call them riots, but there were protests, and they demanded ethnic studies. And as you were growing up in the 60s in San Francisco, to hear anyone talk about ethnic studies, what were people saying? People were saying, "Oh, that's basket weaving. Oh, that's, what are you doing with that? That's no good." So I I have to admit that the mindset for me was ethnic studies. I get that every time I eat. Every time I go to church, I get that every time I have a Filipino meal.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, look, they're all showing up here, and we have Corky Lee joining us. Corky Lee from New York.
Whoa.
So, welcome, Corky Lee, to the Filipino. Well, it's not the Asian Pacific American Heritage Month celebration. This is as I was explaining to Daniel Phil Gonzalez, Corky. This is kind of like the pre-show to the Super Bowl. So we're doing that. But let me finish my story, since Corky is going to be sort of semi-incognito. By choice, not by choice. I've invited him. Thank you, Corky, for being there. I remember when people said it was just basket weaving, ethnic studies, ethnic anything. And I was part of a mindset that went along with that said, yeah, I'm growing up. I'm learning my advanced placement studies at Lowell. I'm going to go to a good school for college. I'm going to go be a corporate Filipino or something. Little did I know I'd wind up in a Sulu type of outfit in space on a Zoom meeting for Asian Pacific American Heritage Month in 2020. But that's where you find yourself. That's where you find yourself now. You just never know. But all that basket weaving talk was put in my head. And of course, we know that's plain BS. It's not basket weaving. That's the pejorative. It's real studies of American history, of our history. Oh, you can go back to the indigenous Philippines, but if you want to please the academic world, the American history part makes it a part of the academy just as much, or maybe more so, or makes it more relevant. So anyway, Dan Gonzalez joins us. We'll start momentarily. We have some people. Actually, I think now we have no people on our Facebook. We're recording on Zoom, but if people don't want to participate, they can also join in on Facebook Live. We're live, but don't try to match up our lips, because it's a 30-second delay. It's because I used to do radio talk show host shows in San Francisco and Washington, D.C. And there's the infamous 7-second delay. And that's because it doesn't take much to get out that one expletive, a single syllable expletive that, as Filipinos would say, rhymes with pak. But in I guess in a foreign kind of, or in a different language, you need 30 seconds to stop something that may Zoom live and go on Facebook Live that you want to prevent people from seeing, or something. I don't know. A 30-second delay seems excessive, to me at least. Anyway, professional broadcaster that I am. Yeah. So we will talk about Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And if you're tuning in, you're on the pre-show on Facebook Live. I know you're probably not, but if you were, if you just happen to catch us, I want you all to think about what this what this Pacific American Heritage Month means. I mean, what's it mean if you're Filipino? What's it mean if you're Chinese? What's it mean if you are Vietnamese, South Asian, Indian, Pakistani, and then the existential question: how is this different from all other Asian Pacific American Heritage Months of the past? So that's what we'll get into. It's still only 10:42. It's still early. I just want to know how many people, excuse me, in the audience. I guess that includes you. I guess you realized that the Spanish-American War was celebrating an anniversary of sorts with the declaration of the Spanish-American War uh, as of April 26th. Or, I mean, is that something, a date that sticks in your mind, or did it surprise you when I mentioned it too when we talked a few days ago?
Uh, it doesn't. Yeah,
Is that really that
you
special?
know, the invasion, you know, and then the mock battle at Manila Bay, that usually sticks in my mind more than the declaration itself. It's events like that that get recorded by American history. We have a towering statue in the middle of Union Square, on the west side of Union Square here in San Francisco, that's dedicated to that moment in history. And the battle was fake. Also, the promise of independence of the Philippines, well, by the United
Yeah.
States. Oh, no, no, we're not here to take you over. We're just here to help you defeat the Spanish and become a member nation, you know. And that was fake. We didn't get that until 1946, and not without a whole lot of dealing.
Yeah, and that's why, you know, that whole thing, the declaration of the war, is kind of a significant historical milestone, at least for me, when I think of, you
It's
know,
because you
we're
went to
coming up to
Harvard.
Asian. No, no, it's not that. It's not that. It's just no. Look, there are nuggets. There are nuggets of history that we remember, and dates are those milestone markers that are important. You know, we see them, we remember them. Here's the thing that I think it's kind of noteworthy is that we're coming up to Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. We have this date, the declaration of the Spanish American War. And what does that mean? That really is the beginning of the Philippines colonial destiny, because the Philippines gets taken over by the US, you know, when the US wins that battle and then ultimately wins the Philippine US war, or defeats the Filipinos who established a republic. But then we have, on after that Saturday, the declaration of the Spanish American War. On Sunday, we have the killing of Magellan, where the Philippine natives, the indigenous, supposedly, well, they did, but it wasn't Lapu Lapu necessarily who killed Magellan, but we have the Filipinos kill the explorer for Spain, which is not exact. I mean, Spain did rule the Philippines for some 300 years after that. They didn't overtake the Spanish, but now you have in one weekend remnants of the US imperialism, remnants of Spanish imperialism, and now we come up to May 1st, Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And it's almost like, boy, for Filipinos, the lead in to Asian Pacific American Heritage Month is really kind of mind blowing if you think about it. I mean, I thought about it. I thought it was mind blowing. And then, oh, I left out one date, Dan, that when I put it on Facebook, people responded. They responded to this, and it doesn't surprise me. In Washington this summer, I had a poster, and the poster, or I found a poster on eBay, and the poster was of the 1904 exposition at the World's Fair, showcasing Filipinos, indigenous Filipino tribes. And so uh, that is, I posted it, and on people on Facebook responded to it. And oh, we're joined by Man Yi Chow. Hi, Man Yi.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Great.
Just relax, and we're having a conversation or a little bit of a monologue with some of my favorite podcast guests and some people I know in the community who are good friends. And so we're talking about the lead-in. Our show actually begins, or the official program actually begins at 11 o'clock. But I thought, or 11 o'clock Pacific, but I thought we'd give people a sort of like a background sense of how this is put together. Clearly, this kind of one-man band operation is going to show warts and all, but people are interested in that behind-the-scenes stuff. We're welcoming people. We're talking about Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, and Mani Chow is an artist, and she has a special story to tell about the Chinatowns the ethnic Asian towns in Seattle and how they've come together in view of some very anti-racist or anti-Asian attacks made against the community. So we'll have Mani to talk about this later on in the program. But Mani, how are things in Seattle, Mani?
They're pretty good. We're actually having a pretty nice weather day. Today is May Day, of course, so we actually have the Proud Boys who are going to be marching, and they're going to City Hall, which isn't far from our neighborhood. So we're sort of projecting and preparing ourselves in case they do come near the area. So just a lot of community work and also protests going on, the caravans happening, and yeah, otherwise today's pretty okay.
Yeah. So I mean, but there's going to be a protest, huh?
Yeah, they're going to be they're marching down Jackson Street, which is a main street that goes sort of through the International District here in Seattle. So we're just trying to prepare for that.
Yeah. And now I see. Hi, Mani. And so Mani, we look forward to hearing your story. I had the professor on with us briefly, and he's gone. I'm joined by Christopher Castro with the Filipino American National Historical Society Museum, and we have other guests to join. I'm hoping to be joined by a person who I've interviewed recently, Jem Scorp, a Filipino nurse. Oh, and here's Corky Lee. Where are you, Corky? I think I've unmuted you. Corky, you there?
I can't get my image. Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. But
yeah.
Hold on a second. Maybe I don't know why your image is down. But I can hear you. So you're good. Corky Lee's from New York, and he's going to talk about Chinatown in New York and the things that they're going through in Chinatown. So between Seattle and New York City, and we got Stockton in the house, and we've got San Francisco State's Daniel Phil Gonzalez, who, let's see if Dan's phone. Dan's phone. Dan, you're working there.
Yeah, I got it.
Daniel
Unfortunately, Northern Lights came up from behind me, and it's such a beautiful thing. It's also very distracting, but I'm sure Mani can identify.
No, it's cool. Look, I'm all for the virtual backdrops that Zoom gives us all, because it says, hey, look, we're on Zoom. We're using the technology. I am not too lazy to put up my own picture. I have my own picture, but my pictures, I don't know. I don't have any that I think are appropriate for this, but I wanted to show social
distancing. Are you still into that really kinky cartoon stuff? Man, I thought you would outgrow that by now. You're.
That's the wrong Emil. Okay. So Daniel feels it's so we have a lot of different corridors represented: Seattle, Stockton, San Francisco. Corky's still having a problem with his camera, but you're there, Corky, right?
Yeah, I can hear the conversation. It was interesting you mentioned April 26th and then the April 27th. On April 28th is the day that Chinese railroad workers completed 10 miles of track in one day, building the Transcontinental Railroad.
And I know that you are very big on that story and have gone to Utah and have documented with your photography the events since then, the anniversaries. Tell us, we want to hear a little about that in the pre-show. What's going on with the celebrations? They still have them annual?
This year they canceled it due to COVID-19. But I started organizing a flash mob type photo in front of the reenactment of the two locomotives going back to the 145th anniversary in 2014.
Wow. And I remember you had one of those great photographs, oops, that's all right. One of the great photographs that people see where you have the two trains meeting each other and people, where it symbolizes the golden spike, right?
Well, yes, it also symbolized the reunification of the North and the South right after the Civil War.
And the pictures that you've taken, if people want to see any of them on the web, where can they go?
They could probably go to the Chinese American Museum of Washington, D.C. They have that photograph in their permanent collection.
Oh, great. Well, I just know that when we were just talking about the lead up to Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, it's so important, all these days, like May's coming up, and then, we had, like you said, the Spanish American War, we had Magellan, and then you have the 28th, what was it what was the milestone? 10,000 miles, you said?
10 miles of track.
10 miles of track completed in one day.
Oh, 10 miles in one track. Okay.
Yeah, it was actually a bet between Union Pacific and Central Pacific Railroad. It was, I think the bet was for like $10,000. But Central Pacific, when they won, never got to collect the $10,000.
What happened?
Well, I think basically what happened was that Central Pacific bested Union Pacific coming in from Omaha, Nebraska, and they just never paid. That's what I understand. It was sort of a gentleman's bet, but Central Pacific never collected.
It was a gentleman's bet lacking gentlemen.
Yeah. Well, also, it's important to note, because it's never really mentioned anywhere, how much each railroad company was paid for laying 1 mile of track. It started at, I believe it was $12,000 per mile. And then if you had to build a bridge, go over a ravine or a river, it was like $24,000 for every mile. And the most difficult part was going through the Sierra Nevada granite mountains, and the price was $36,000 per mile, because they had to dig tunnels, and I think it was like 10 tunnels. So $10,000 would have been pretty close to 1 mile of track laid.
And Corky, when the Chinese were brought to be laborers, what did that represent in terms of a cost savings to the railroad? What kind of boon did the laborers present? Was it more than just manpower, or was it all economic?
I understood that the non-Chinese were paid 3 times as much. The Chinese were actually paid basically a dollar a day, from what I understand. But the Chinese had to pay for their own room and board and their meals, whereas the non-Chinese got room and board free.
Yeah, so they ended up working at a negative, huh? At a loss.
Yeah, well, history doesn't really mention the railroad strike that they had in 1867, which stemmed from Truckee, California, back to Sacramento. That's 105 miles. And how they organized that, history really doesn't say, but at that point, there was 3,000 Chinese laborers that were working on the railroad, of which by the time they finished, I think it was closer to 15,000 railroad workers.
Yeah, that's right.
I had heard that the Chinese use what we know today as collective bargaining. And I really don't understand what collective bargaining was, but collective bargaining doesn't get into the unions until about the 1890s. So the Chinese were about 30 years ahead of their time.
Yeah, Corky, I'm really glad you brought that up. I did not mean to exclude, and no pun intended with the word exclude, although it to be seems to be a word that comes up a lot when it comes to Asian Americans, Chinese, Filipinos, South Asians, Japanese Americans. I mean, it's just, but I mean, it's an insight about what happens. You know, we're celebrating May 1st, Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, and all these things come up in the week just before. And we're going to talk about what's going on in New York City with you a little later in the program, Corky. But I also want to bring up one more date, the day before, April 30th, 1904. That was a day I put up something, the St. Louis World's Fair. Yeah, I put up something on Facebook, and people responded, and they said, we don't know, we don't understand, we don't understand, we didn't know this was going on. Filipinos, the poster I got from eBay was of indigenous Filipinos put on exhibit as if in a zoo at the World's Fair, the St. Louis
It
World's
was in
Fair.
fact a human zoo exhibit, yes.
Yeah. And, you know, I did my show, Emil Amok, all bucked up at the Capitol Fringe in Washington this summer. And a friend of mine who I went to high school with, Caucasian, didn't know this history, but he's a big researcher. He went on eBay and found this poster, and I was performing that night. I couldn't make the final bid, and I got outbid. So I lost the poster, but I got this poster of the Filipino American, or they weren't Americans, they're just the indigenous Filipinos on display. Look at the tribesmen, look at the real headhunters, watch them eat dog. And, you know, that's a part of our Filipino American history, because they were here in St. Louis and they were like the big exhibit that year. It's like, come on, people in St. Louis, a town where I lived for 2 years, people were saying, come on, let's go see the Filipinos. And, you know, I didn't really get into that story until recently, in the last few years. And it just gets to me when I retell that story. And when I put a picture of that poster on Facebook, people respond and say, how many people do you think really know that this happens or happened? How many people do you think know this story? And, you know, Daniel Phil Gonzalez, our professor from San Francisco State, you knew this story, but this is one of those stories that people don't talk about or we don't hear about, right?
We had heard about the story when at about the time that we started ethnic studies at SF State, but the thing that got to us most was somebody from Seattle sent us a postcard, and it was first printed at the time of the opening of the exhibit. And the postcard showed a sideways profile of an alleged Filipino in mountain style garb with an extended coccyx, meaning it was a Filipino with a tail. Okay, so
Yeah.
all of this was a part of the very extremely racialized war in the Philippines.
Yeah.
You can't separate the exhibit and the coverage that it got from the media, the print media coverage of the war in the Philippines, because they're both going on simultaneously.
Right, right. And so really what they're using with this exhibit was to sell the war, to sell American imperialism, to sell colonization. And isn't it
Yeah,
wonderful
the
that all,
primitiveness, the need, right? For, and here's the
yeah,
laugher, the need for the Christianization of the
yeah,
Filipino people when they were already very Catholic at that point.
yeah. I mean, this is the thing that got me. I went through life as a student in high school and college and history, and I didn't really understand what was going on until just recently, and so it's another one of those end of April hallmarks of history that we remember, and now here we are, May 1st, Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. It's 11:03. I said we begin our show promptly at 11. If you missed the
Wow, that's Phil
preamble,
Nash. Hey, Phil. Wow, long time no see, dude.
yeah, as I explained to all our people here with us, that this is going to be like the pre-show to the Super Bowl, right? And I was going to show people behind the scenes how this thing worked. And all right, what the hell? I'll unmute you all. See, now, look, far be it from me to be the Zoom master and to invite all these Filipinos and Asian Americans and Chinese Americans and to have everyone here at
Very
this.
risky endeavor.
No, it's to the Emil Amok Takeout Filipino Lumpia Zoom party, and I wanted you all to be here. But far be it for me to have you come here and say hi or speak or reach out, and then to have me say, now I'm going to mute you all. I'm going to mute you all so you don't say anything. It's so yeah, I mean, because mutedness is the normalcy of Asian Americans. It's normal for Asian Americans to be mute, except when I want to hear you laugh at my jokes. So I need you unmuted to laugh at my joke.
That wasn't funny, man.
Oh, wait a minute. No, all right, I'm going to meet you all again. I'm going to meet you all. No, you can unmute or unmute yourself. That's the action. That's the action that we give you. You can mute or unmute yourself. That's the affirmative action in this. And so I just thought, look, welcome everyone. It's now 11:05, and I said this thing would start at 11. I had the pre-show.
Asian time, man.
It's not just Asian time. It's this is, well, okay, maybe it was. Dan was really early, so that was Dan was so early he might have to turn in his Filipino card, but that's all right. He's here now. He's here now. No, look, this is serious stuff. It's May 1st, Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, and I always said to myself, I've written this column, Emil Amok, started in Asian Week. Phil Tajitsu Nash, who joins us, he's a professor in Asian American Studies, and he also wrote for Asian Week. And I remember writing these columns 25 years ago. I've written a column for the last 25 years on Asian Americans in society. First in Asian Week, now at the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, and a couple of other papers around the country, Inquirer.net and the Hawaii Filipino Chronicle. Whenever it comes to Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, I say, why hasn't anyone stopped me yet and said, Happy Asian American Heritage Month? No one ever stopped me. And I said, why? This is a source of pride. And so I want to be the first. If anyone hasn't yet, I want to be the first to greet you and say, Happy Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. Monty in Seattle, Dan in San Francisco, Chris in Stockton, Phil in Washington, Jennifer in New York, Corky in New York, Jim Scorpion in New York and Queens. I want to, because it should be celebratory, but it's hard to get to the celebration parts because as we were talking about, the beginnings or the last parts of April, historically, not so great reminders of how Filipino Americans, Asian, Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans, how we were all treated, from, and then April 30th, the exposition. So I want to be the first to say, welcome. When I was in DC, going to an Asian Pacific American Heritage Month celebration meant going to a government party or a government kind of to-do where people would have food, lo mein, maybe egg roll, maybe maybe a little lumpia, right? And definitely the entertainment would be hula girls. A congressman would get up and say, "Happy Asian Pacific American Heritage Month." That was the kind of thing we'd get. Everyone would laugh and drink, and then we'd go home and forget about the day or the month. That was our time. But this is different. This is different. We get to Zoom. I wrote my column. I talked about the Filipino history. And I said, I want to reach out and see all the people who were important to my columns in the past. See the people who make Asian American, our Asian American community now, from Man Yi in Seattle to Corky, an old friend in New York, to Jem, who's on the front lines as a nurse in Elmhurst, Queens. I wanted to bring you all together in this little midday thing, Lumpia party, to gather and to share our Filipino stories, our Asian American stories, and to share our thoughts about history, because this is what, I'm going to ask you all, so prepare your answer about why 2020 is different, really, from all Asian Pacific American Heritage Months of the past, because it's different, right? It really is different. I mean, here you are with me. We're celebrating our vertical glass ceiling, if you will. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, it's a, we can reach out sort of almost, Zoom is like our little sneeze plate, protect us from each other. But I brought us together to think about what it means to be together, and also what it means. Why is it heritage and not history? And this is my thing. My thing, it's heritage and not history, because history, you can learn, you can unlearn, you can forget it. You can embrace it or not. You can not even, you could disregard it. But heritage sticks with you. Heritage is the good parts and the bad parts. And the good parts we run to embrace, and we run to say, this is ours. And the bad parts, we can't help it, but they become part of our DNA. They become part of our experience. Because history, like I said, is forgotten, but heritage is inherited and it lives on in us. And that's why we can talk about 1904. We could talk about the Chinese and the railroad. We could talk about Magellan and Lapu-Lapu killing Magellan and Mactan in 1521 in the final week of April. We can talk about, we could talk about the Spanish-American War and the declaration of the Spanish-American War and why that still reverberates within us. We forget the details of history, but there are parts of it that remain with us in our DNA that we inherit. It's a kind of pain we inherit, but it's also the thing that we struggle against, because we're here, we overcome that, we succeed, and then we lapse back, and based on how our outside forces and our inside forces, how, who wins that battle between who we are on the inside and what people outside say we are. So that's the constant battle of being Asian Pacific American all throughout. So I think about all this stuff all the time as I write my columns. And I thought, for now, hey, let's bring us all together. Let's bring the the people who've been here for a while. I don't mean to date us, but Daniel, Phil, and Phil, Tajitsu Nash, we've been here a long time. We know what it's like, Phil, right? From the very first Asian
yeah.
Pacific.
Yeah, you face it, man. We're old. We're getting old.
We're the OGs.
Oh,
No.
geez.
Nice to hear you admit it, Phil.
Well,
OGs.
I remember the first Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, so I guess that kind of dates me. Corky also. I mean, I know some of us were around when it first happened. Literally, I was at the Basement Workshop, Asian American Cultural Group in New York, and we heard that Ruby Moy and Frank Horton's office, Republican from New York State, and Norman Minetta's office from California got together to put on an Asian Pacific American Heritage Week. At the time, it was a week. And we activists, Asian American activists and artists in New York said, what the heck is this? What do we do? And finally, we decided to reach out. So Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans, Filipino Americans, we reached out to the Indian Americans. We started to put together a typical Asian thing. And then something happened that was quite extraordinary. Jeff Lee, whose family has been living in Chinatown, New York for many generations, he is and was a bass player and guitar player in a band called The Heat. And they had a single called High School Sweater, which was your typical teenage angst song. In no way Asian American, just boy wants girl. And so Jeff said, how about letting me play in this Asian Pacific American Heritage Festival?
Yeah.
And the rest, people were saying, what? You're not doing the fan dance? What? You're not doing 10 Shots Alive? What are you doing? And so we had this argument, and frankly, the argument continues till today. Is a guy with a erhu better than the guy playing a 6-string guitar? Are they both or neither fully Asian American? I mean, what is Asian American? Ultimately, he was allowed to play, just like Charlie Chin playing the only Chinaman in Great Falls, Montana blues. You know, so we had a little bit of everything, and I think that dichotomy and that synergy continues.
Yeah, well, we're such a diverse group, you know. First it was the Chinese and the Filipinos and the Japanese and the Koreans, and then nothing for a long time until 1965, and then the immigration lifted, and then there was the floodgates, right? And with all the floodgates opening up, we have immigration from the 60s, 80s, 90s, and now look at this diverse group. And I want to get back to you, Phil, but I want to turn to the person who I think exemplifies how different this Asian Pacific American Heritage Month is in 2020. And that's because, you know, we're in this situation with the pandemic. I don't think there is a more essential Asian Pacific American around than the Asian Pacific Americans who work in medical care as either nurses or as doctors. And joining us now, Jim Scorp, who works in Elmhurst, Queens, the hotspot of hotspots in this COVID crisis. And Jim, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, it's so great of you to join us. And I've interviewed you a couple of times, and we've been through some ups and downs. When I first got to you, you were, I think, coming off a night shift, so you were pretty sleepy, and now, and you weren't positive then. You know, you were out there fighting the battle. Then you became positive. You had you know, contracted the virus, and now you went into quarantine again. And now tell me about your health status now. You're now no longer positive? What did they say when you tested again?
I got my second test and I came back. I mean, it went back negative. So I just had my antibody test yesterday. I'm still waiting for that to confirm.
Yeah. Great. And so you are working again, and are you back with your family as well?
Not yet, because I'm not so sure. Even though if I test negative, I can still bring something home. I'm not trying to take that risk because especially now that we're thinking about a second wave. So, no.
So you're still quarantined, but you're going to work.
I just came back from my night shift. I'm still gonna be working again tonight. I mean, last night I was in the other place, and tonight I'll be back to Amherst. I've been working in Amherst ever since.
Yeah. See, this is what gets to people when they hear about, they see the newspaper stories, and you were part of that great story in Stat in the Boston Globe that was printed recently. I've written about you in my columns, Inquirer.net, and on the ALDEF blog, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund blog. But people don't understand, sometimes don't get the dedication you have. Why are you so dedicated to your work? Is it a calling? What is it?
It's a mix for me. It's a mixture of calling our culture. Being a Filipino, we have this inborn dedication that I don't know. Sometimes they laugh at me, telling me, "Oh, you have the bloodline of Lapu-Lapu." I said, "I don't know, because I came from also from Visayas. Maybe I do have, but all I tell them that, yeah, I'm a Filipino, and maybe this is how I was genetically encoded by my creator. Um, that's all I have."
But when you told me a story about all the death you saw at the very early stages of the pandemic, and you were surprised because you take it as a source of pride. If someone is close to death, you take it as a source of pride to will them back to life, to comfort them back to life. When you saw all that death around you at Elmhurst, Queens, in the hospital at Elmhurst, how'd that make you feel?
Well, it's really an ego, because we nurses always have like a competition within ourselves, like who is the best. Being in this field for a while, then most of the time, Filipino nurses are really the top. I mean, we're not class B, we are the class A nurses. I claim for that because, like for example, in my unit, the source of knowledge always come from Filipino nurses. When it comes to skills, it always goes through Filipino nurses. And then when it comes to risk takers, always Filipino nurses. Like we always do something impossible. But lately, when this happens, of course, we always rush to the front line. We always go try to save this COVID patient. And all of a sudden, looks like, hey, there's no magic right now. Looks like what happened to the Filipino spirit. Like looks like we can no longer save these people, these patients. So what's going on? Something is not right. We used to have like we used to have like, oh, like an instinct. We know what to do. But right now, what's going on? Something is missing right now. There's a missing link that we cannot solve.
Yeah. Well, how does that make you feel when you know the thing that you worked it seems to not work, and when it seems like how disappointed are you that there's that happens?
It's really frustrating because yesterday when I came to work, my supervisor didn't even notice that I was just behind the door to clock in and all that. She was introducing me to a new supervisor. She told the supervisor, "Don't worry, James Scope is here tonight, and Tony is here tonight." Tony is another Filipina from Presbyterian Hospital. She's a doctor back home. I have a medical background, but she's actually is a doctor also back home. So she was introducing us to the new supervisor that don't worry tonight, the two best nurses are here. They are, of course, they are all Filipino, and this is a black supervisor. So what I'm trying to say is that yes, we are the best now. We could be the best nurses, but we are so useless right now. Like three death, I had three patients died in my hands in one shift, and that's really bad. I never had that kind of experience before. That I usually able to save them, whatever skills I had, ACLS certified, PAL certified. We knew exactly the protocol. We knew exactly what to do. But right now, no, we can't. We can't.
And yeah, that just happened just recently or yesterday or what?
No, that was the peak. That was the peak. And then lately, we have one death on the table because it slows down. It slows down, but our neurosurgeon, I've been talking to our neurosurgeon. They have a new worry right now about something like, I don't know, can I share it?
Yeah.
Okay, I spoke to our neurosurgeon, one of our neurosurgeon, and he was telling me we have this patient that just came. I don't want to mention because
Yeah.
HIPAA protocol. Patient just came for a specific issue in the nose. I don't want to give them a clue. But what happens, this is a COVID patient, and then this virus, whom we thought is only a respiratory problem, now most likely is neuro issue. Because what he explained to me, that the virus is pressing some part of the brain that's too much that the one of the pupil of the eye pop up, and it's emergency protocol. Because if we see symptoms like it will be the two eyes bulging out, is a very emergency critical issue that we have to rush the patient to the OR. This patient had only one part of the eye bulging out. That means to say it's pressing the other hemisphere of the brain. uh, if that's the case, then what happened? They did like they opened the whole skull just to release the pressure from the brain, and so the patient came to us with no more skull, the frontal skull. And what he was telling me, this is really something new that they were worrying about because this virus was not acting like that before. It coincided to the other doctor from the other hospital that I mentioned to you before that this doctor was removing a blood clot from the brain, and while removing the blood clot, this virus are trying to form another clots while performing while removing the other blood clots. So the surgeon was telling in the news that in his 30 years of experience, this is something new that will really change the textbook of medical school. I mean, medical textbook. And I talked to Tony last night, what is the experience they having in their hospital. And she was confirming, she was telling me this virus is making now more neuro because most of the patients that are coming to them are having symptoms of seizure. Having symptoms of seizure, that is absolutely is more neuro symptom right now. And same thing with us, our patients are becoming younger and younger. They're also having symptoms of neuro, like also stroke. So two hospital right now comparing. I mean, true because we're not releasing data yet, but yeah, it's no longer respiratory. It's more now of neuro. So probably I was thinking last night maybe this is the second wave that they are talking about. That is gonna be worse than the first wave. I have no clue. There's no data yet to confirm.
But but what you're seeing, excuse me, but what you're seeing, Jem, is you're seeing the virus mutate, or you're seeing the virus change, seeing the virus.
I cannot really confirm that. I'm not a scientist. I'm not the doctor doing data. It's very raw to say that right now. I mean,
Okay, but you're seeing the symptoms definitely change. You're definitely seeing the
all I
symptoms.
can tell is change from respiratory,
Yeah.
and now it's more neuro. It's now attacking more of the brain, making blood clots, making the brain swell, causing seizure. All of these are neurologic symptoms. This is no longer respiratory.
So you've seen it at the very beginning. You're fighting it now. How do you view this? I mean, can we call it an enemy? Is it an enemy, or how do you view it, and how do you go to work every day? Because you still go to work, even though you're well, then you got the virus, and you're well again, and you still go to work.
At first, when I got tested negative, I feel so confident. Like, oh, okay, I have the antibody right now, so I worry less because that's the concept. Once you have the antibody will protect you.
Have you been tested? Have you been tested for the antibody?
Yeah, I got my antibody tested. We had two. How you call it? I got the serum antibody the other day, and yesterday they do like glucose something. It's just the finger stick. So I don't know. That's something I didn't understand yet. But I got the serum 2 days ago, and yesterday the finger stick that they told me that will also tell me that it will be tell if I have the antibody. But most likely, the doctor that I spoke to said that I should have the antibody right now because I tested negative. So having that perception, I'm telling myself that I should be like
Of
Well,
course.
yeah. Now I saw you're in a van. I saw a young boy behind you.
Yeah, that's my son actually. Because what happens? I
Hi.
gonna work in this other job, and I need a car.
Well,
So
here's the
I'm just waiting for my wife to get the car, and I have to go to work.
well, here's the thing that people don't understand. You're at the hardest hospital, at the most COVID hospital in New York City, the hottest of hotspots, and you've got to work several jobs,
Uh,
right? You got another job.
I don't know. I'm not the only crazy Filipino in New York that has 2 or 3 jobs. I have 3.
Yeah. And different hospitals.
Yeah, hospitals, nursing homes, private care, home care, travel. It's all mixed.
See, and when I think of your situation, I think of think of it in terms of Filipino history. You know, my father came over and he worked in the restaurants. My father came in the 1930s. You immigrated in the 2000s, and look at how far we have come or not come. You are now working in New York, putting your life on the line with each and every job. You're working 3 jobs. You're the most essential Filipino American I know. And when do you say, look, I know you're saying I've got to think of my family. I'm not going back to the hospitals. But when do you say, I can't take this risk with my life? Or do you ever think that? Do you ever put yourself first instead of your patients?
That's a tough question, but I don't know. Ever since I have this calling, I always put my patient first. I don't know. I mean, I already talked to my wife. The moment she married to me, I told her, "Hey, this is my calling. First, I wanted to be a doctor, but for some reasons, I was not able to finish it. I'm a nurse right now, and this is my dedication. Probably, This is one of the reasons probably that I am so involved in this case because I love to know first. I want to know first. Like, if only I'm a doctor, I want to find a cure first. You know, we Filipinos wanted to be the first. So we have that ego that we want to have that first feeling that, hey, I got a trophy of knowing it first. So not only that, but yes, I want to be the person who should never give up. I just want to be there. I want to treat my patient. I know the risk of having my bringing this virus to my family, but of course with the extra precaution. So sad to say, job first before myself.
And do you think that mindset is particularly Asian or particularly Filipino?
If this is not Asia, if this is not Filipino, then why my family tree is doing it? My father has been doing it, and all my relatives, my aunt, they've been doing it. They're still in the front line. All my mother's side, they're all nurses. None of them are doctors. Everybody's nurses. The same thing with my father. I mean, my father is not in the medical field. He's not a nurse, but he was always a risk taker in his job. No matter what's the calling, he is there. Whatever the circumstances, he's always there. I don't think this is not me. I don't think it's just only my bloodline. It should be Filipino.
Well, I honor you, but let me just a few more questions. I know you're waiting for your wife and you got to get to your next job, but I'm concerned about you were out there in the front lines, right? And then you were telling me this story before. Then you go back in the subway to go home. And what kind of response did you get from some people? I know there's some people who honor the nurses and they praise and they sing praises to the nurses on the front lines. Tell me about what you experienced on the subway.
Well, I only had that one. I mean, if I have to tell from the first time I came in here, that was a really bad one. I was taking the train from like after Manhattan. No, it was from Brooklyn going back to my apartment. That was the very bad experience that I had. Remember, I told you I was on the train, and then four black kids surrounded me, and just was hit. All of them were hitting me on the head. I cannot move because I was being encircled. Four of them. So the setup of the train is like the seat on the train. They're facing each other. So I'm here, one on my left side, two on my front, and one on my back. So I cannot really move, and they're just hitting me like simultaneously. They're hitting my head, and I was so glad that somebody, a Mexican descent, he looks like Mexican. He must be Mexican. He was the one telling those young kids, "Hey, stop beating that guy because maybe he's not because he said because he doesn't he look Chinese and he doesn't speak English. You're beating him up."
But that was a bad.
That was long before.
Yeah,
But when this COVID happens, I was surprised. I was very confident that hey, people are very appreciative of nurses. So I have my scrub, went on the subway. I was so surprised that a black guy was just following me, and then he's telling me, "Hey, Chinese guy, go home, go back to your country." And then after that, I was just moving away from him. He's still following me. And after he told me, "Hey, you're the one who you take away our job," and he was just talking nonsense. I mean, I just disregard him, but
wow.
I don't know.
So you actually felt that. Now you know that the experience of Asian American harassment and the anti-Asian American sentiment is really
That was not the first time, and even my supervisor, when I was working in 2000, probably between 2009 and 10, I had expressed also like that. I don't know. Do I look Chinese? I'm not. Somebody else more look Chinese than me.
we're Asian, right? I mean, but my point is, we're in a time where a lot of people are pointing fingers at Asians. And you felt it, and that hurt me as I was hearing that story because, you're sacrificing so much, to be out there, out there saving lives. So did you feel, how did that make you feel when you experienced that?
When I experienced it, two things come in my mind. I mean, I'm just telling myself that hey, I'm professional, I'm more educated than person. They don't understand. If this is how they feel, then the more I should step out and tell them, hey, this is what's going on. Just imagine if all Filipino nurses right now will be like they say, okay, all Filipino nurses go home, all of us. What's gonna happen to America? They don't realize that. Like how many risk takers they have. I mean, if I compare myself, or let's just say, if we compare Filipinos to other nurses, non-Filipino nurses, I believe there are more Filipino nurses that are risk takers, that are more willing to die than other race. Because if I talk to other nurses, they always say, never touch a patient without PPE. Never do this, never do that. They always state about, okay, this is the proper way. This is law. We have long list of reasons not to touch the patient first. But Filipino nurses, we disregard that. We are trying to see lives. We are trying to save lives. That's what we see. That's what we want to have.
Some people would say that's foolhardy. Why do it?
They always call us crazy. They always say, hey, Filipino nurses, stop what you're doing. You're not helping us. Because they always think that since Filipino nurses are working this way, the management will not give us what we need. Because anyway, they can do it. They can work by themselves. Other stuff, Filipino nurses can do it. You can throw them anywhere. You give them 1 day of training, they can move to another floor. Filipino nurses, they don't understand that back home, our training is different. Like in my hospital back in the city, it's different. Every 3 months we rotate. So that means I can really function in every area. So they don't understand that. How come Filipino nurses, you train them a few hours, you train them 1 hour, 1 day, that's it. They can function compared to other non-Filipino nurses because non-Filipino nurses, they don't have that training. They don't have that.
Well, Jim, I appreciate you coming on and talking about this. You know, you are, in my mind, the essential Asian American. You know, there are many essential Asian Americans on the front lines, but the nurses, the doctors, you're out there fighting it, and you gave us a sense of what you're up against. This isn't your first Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. You've been here since 2006, but have you ever celebrated it before, or ever come? You haven't been on a Zoom cast before, huh?
No, it's my first time. I mean, I didn't, to be honest, looks like this is my first time to hear about this. We don't, I
Yeah.
didn't know that we have this Asian thing. I mean, looks like I heard about Cinco de Mayo. I was
Hey, we're all in this together. When we say we're all in this together, we mean we're all in this together. Jim.
Jim, this is Asian Pacific Heritage Month. It's been going on for 41 years.
oh boy. See, maybe I was so busy working.
Well, I appreciate your
Actually,
tenacity.
he wasn't born yet. He wasn't born yet.
Yeah, you wasn't born.
Nah.
Yeah, you're just a young guy. But look, Jim, thank you. Thank you for taking the time here. Please, I'm sure other people have some questions of you. You know, we have Mani.
Well, you've already explained that you arrived here in 2006. How did you end up in New York? Did you go directly to New York when you arrived?
Yeah, I was one of the first batch petitioned by an agency. I just don't want to mention it. It's very like they're very popular in New York. I was one of the first batch being recruited. When I came, they straight to the office is in Brooklyn. I was this position in upper Manhattan.
Yeah.
And that time, they even don't know the time difference, so nobody picked me up from the airport.
Now,
Yeah.
Jim,
When you say batch, were there a number of you from one of the universities or colleges in the Philippines? And which one?
No, it's in different different places in the Philippines.
Okay.
So, but as I said, like first batch because they said there were 10 of us that been recruited by this agency.
And they were from different places throughout
Different
the Philippines.
places.
Okay.
From Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, it's all mixed.
And you said you were from the Visayas. Can you be a little more specific?
Dumaguete.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, my mother's from Camotes.
Oh, okay.
Now you
Lapis
guys-
Leyte.
Cebu
Yeah.
North.
She considered herself Cebuano, but you know. So 2006, you were recruited directly by an agency. And did how many other people were recruited to the same hospital or unit that you went to work at?
No, we since we're agency, we all scattered. Like
okay.
yeah, all scattered.
Okay.
And Jim, when you came in 2006, you came as a green card applicant, and
Correct.
it wasn't a temporary visa. There are people now who, I guess, well, it's hard to say where the Trump policy is now, but Trump he put a hold on green cards, although he said, and the details didn't come out at first, but then he said, oh, medical personnel are exempted. We don't know though, but you're still in touch with people in the Philippines who want to come here, right?
Correct. I've been trying to help them through a Filipino agency.
Yeah. And so, but are they scared about this temporary halt that they won't be able to come here?
They're worried because some of them are about to come. Like what's this? Yeah, one I know in few months. The other one is next year. Like the whole family is supposedly because they're not, it's because of green card, but because of this they're so worried.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, what? Let's see. What other? Go ahead.
Yeah, when I was in Houston, my hospital in fact recruited like 1,000 Filipino nurses. So if I count, because the processing should be 5 to 7 years, they should be coming also about next year. There's 1,000 nurses from Philippines. So I don't know what's gonna happen to that.
Yeah. And how about, one thing that gets me is that as a nurse, you still have to have so many jobs as opposed to one job. And you're a veteran nurse. You've been a nurse for 18 years. how hard is it just to be more stable in your profession? Also considering that there's a nursing shortage, certainly hospitals should want to see a
Mhm.
Filipino nurse, value them, hold on to them, or am I just, you know, just unknowledgeable about your industry?
Okay, so it comes to shortage. It is projected by 2022, America will be short of nurses more than million, like a million to 2 million nurses. I don't know how
Yes.
true is that numbers because they're still doing a survey. So having that in mind, if that numbers is correct, then Trump is not really doing a good job. I mean, where can he find like millions of nurses? I don't know. I
Yeah, the problem is
mean,
it's not just Trump. The problem is it's not just Trump, right? The
yeah,
anti-immigrant attitude, in spite of all this, has continued. Look at the way that they treat Latinos and Mexicans that are working in agriculture. They were just 10 years ago, they were talking about shipping them all away. And I said, I can't wait to see what shows up on your grocery shelf if you do that. Just last year, several Chinese immigrant scientists left the country, went back to China. And one of them was the first to invent a test for the COVID-19. Can you
Wow.
imagine that? Within a month of arriving back in China earlier this year, he was the first in the world to develop a COVID-19 test. Okay. And he left the United States because the environment against Chinese was so harsh, and Chinese scientists specifically. So, we should not be surprised about this craziness around immigration policy, because too much of it is grounded in race. And that's one of my other questions. You've talked about being attacked, assaulted, even while you're in your scrubs on the street or on public transportation. Has anybody ever refused to have you assist them and ask for somebody of a different race or a different background?
well, that experience happened in Houston actually. That they requested because should I mention it? Because Houston is really white.
Hey, I lived there. I lived there you were there after. I actually was on the radio and television in
Yeah,
1975. So imagine how I stuck out back
Yeah,
then.
that's
yeah. Houston is very white. I mean, I don't know. If you work in a private hospital, oh my God. I mean, you become black in that hospital.
yeah, you might as well
So
be black. That's right. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing.
yes,
There is no. It's a black-white world, and Filipinos. There was no middle for Filipinos. I knew that growing up in San Francisco, and I even experienced that in other.
Well, you are a little on the dark side, Emil.
Yeah,
So
well, yeah, but but Jim, really, I really appreciate my ability to be able to come to you and to tap you as a source for what's going on in the front lines. You really shared a lot, in terms of how.
I think we all feel honored by your giving us your time and telling us about your life, particularly. What year was it that you were in Houston, and for how long?
2015, 3 years
Oh,
until
just
2018.
recently. Okay.
Yeah,
Did family move with you, or did they stay in New
yeah,
York? Or,
yeah.
oh,
They
okay.
moved with me.
So
Very
and
white. 2015 and still that white, huh?
Oh my.
well,
No other color can hold up a higher position. The highest position you can have is supervisor. You cannot be a nurse manager. You cannot be a supervisor. Worst will be a CEO. Oh, we have
Wow.
one CEO, a Chinese CEO, only for 3 months. Then he was kicked out right away.
Well, a friend of ours is an X-ray doctor, radiologist, and she became the manager of 16 different radiological stations for one hospital. And I believe she's in Houston, but I'll have to check with her. I was concerned when she took that job. She's from San Francisco originally, and herself was a Chinese immigrant as a child. And I've always been curious as to, I've never spoken to her about the racial incident. So it's very useful and valuable to me as a political scientist and social scientist to hear from you, especially speaking so vehemently about it. Thank you.
well, Dan, here's the thing about Houston and Jim. Houston has one of the largest Chinatowns now, so they're very Asian conscious more now than when I was in Houston in the 70s, and Chinatown was 2 blocks and mostly chow mein, chop suey houses. And now it's the entire town, right? I mean, and it's become like the Asian center for not just Chinese, but all Asian.
Vietnamese as well. You know.
Vietnamese. So I want to stand up for Houston. I found that I had when I went there. Well, I don't have to stand up for Houston. Let's see how their Asian Pacific American Heritage Celebration is. Actually, probably big in Houston, Chinatown. Anyway, Jem, thank you. I see Jennifer Eagle has popped up on the screen. Hi, Jennifer. Do you have a question for Jem?
I do, and thank you so much for having me. Jem, I commend you. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing. I am a Filipino based here in New York City. I work for Facebook and born and raised in Queens. So my parents are still in Queens, and
Our neighbors.
Yes, we are. And I wasn't sure whether or not you lived in Queens, but hearing the stories from my parents, like almost every day, they have a friend dying. Like one day, 6 people. And all in Queens.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you is, I'm not sure living in Queens, like do you feel like you have a community outside of work? Like, do you have a Filipino community that is supporting you, that you're able to like maybe helping your wife or your kids, to help you get through this?
Well, right now, since 2006 that I was here, I only have my friends, Filipino friends, and it's my first time to be connected with Filipino like organization like the NAFCON, because of Miss Poultry, my supervisor, who is very aggressive, and she's the one responsible why I'm here right now. Other than that, no. I mean, like, I don't know, like most Filipinos that I know, they are not so compared to other states. Like Texas, we have a very strong Filipino community. Florida has a very strong community. They even, like on weekends they come out and come together. But New York, I didn't feel that. Looks like New Yorkers are just so very workaholic. I don't know. Is that reason?
Too much work.
I mean, it's a lot of work, that's for sure. But I also think it's like also dependent on what part of Queens you're in. Like Queens has one of the largest Filipino communities in New York City, next to Jersey City. So, yeah. But the thing is that it's also dependent also on the age range. Then you have the Philams, then you have like the immigrants. Then it's very all spread out, but at the same time, like it's very diverse. So unfortunately, it's almost quite cliquey, if that makes sense.
There you go.
Like you start to find your community usually at church. Like that's where they're mostly going to be, or like in Jackson Heights and Roosevelt Avenue at the Philam Bar.
That's where I am.
Yeah,
you're in Jackson Heights.
Yeah.
You meet people at
Jim.
At the donuts. Yeah.
Jim, I heard you mention poultry.
Yeah.
Poultry is part of Kensington Dow, correct?
Correct.
I'm actually a board member of that organization.
Oh, she was inviting me a couple of times before this happens.
Yeah, you may have treated Stephen DeCastro. He was discharged about 3 weeks ago.
Oh, Miss Poultry was connecting me to the wife to ask about information about him. At that time, probably when they scanned him, I was not the nurse. Probably I was off or what, but I was able to check on the patient. I mean, on Mr. DeCastro. And they were connecting to me and give them inputs. Yes, that name pops up. Like I really check on his chart, but I was not able to treat him.
Yeah. See, look. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. Oops. Well,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I think you may have spoken to Rose, Steve's wife.
Wife, correct.
See,
yeah, they're friends of mine.
See, it's a small world after all. As large as the Filipino community and the Asian American community, and we have Queens in the house, we have Seattle in the house, San Francisco in the house, Stockton in the house, and yet when you think about Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, my instinct was, let's get us all together and we can at least look at each other and say hi or share stories and this story, very personal, Jim, you're saving lives, and, someone that he knows, and we're all connected. And Jennifer's trying to tell you that, you can meet Filipinos at more than just one coffee and donut church gathering. They're all over. But it is something about New York. It's a imposing place. And, and yet hopefully through our gathering here, that you're appreciated for the work you do and that you're connected with the community. So Jim, I thank you. Take care of yourself. We'll be in touch. Thank you for sharing your stories with the people here on Emil Amok's Takeout, our little Asian Pacific American Heritage Month Lumpia party, and get to know, I'll connect you with all the New Yorkers and everyone here, and we'll stay in touch, okay?
Thank you, Jim. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, you can hang out if you need, but if your wife comes,
Yeah.
I understand. You're in New York or in Queens. Jennifer is in New York. Corky, are you there with us? Oh, Corky's not here. Oh, well. Okay.
My web says he's trying to connect to audio, but
Yeah, he's been connecting to audio for the past 50 minutes. So.
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Corky, where's Corky?
I can hear you guys.
Oh, okay, good.
Corky, oh, that's you. You're on another line.
Yeah, I had to call back in again.
Corky, so you were the wiseacre. I said, I only have room for one Corky Lee. I don't need two Corky Lees. So Jim, you ought to know Corky because he knows everybody. Corky's in New York, and we'll get out to Seattle to Mani. Mani, thank you for hanging in there. I appreciate Mani's the unifier. She's going to close us with her unifying tale of art and bringing all the Asian communities together in Seattle. But I want to turn to Corky next because Corky, what's going on in New York and Chinatown? What's happening there? And Jen and Gem is sort of like a diamond, sort of like a gemstone kind of thing. But what's happening in Chinatown in New York, Corky?
Well, tomorrow I'm going to go down to Chinatown and photograph Chinese Americans who have been recruited by the Guardian Angels. That's Curtis Sliwa's group. They're going to be patrolling Chinatown. They've been doing it for about 2 weeks now, but there's another resident group of young guys who are also patrolling Chinatown because a lot of the incidences and hate crimes have been directed at Chinese in and around Chinatown.
Now, so this anti-Asian American harassment thing has kind of revitalized the Guardian Angels because they've been kind of dormant for a while. No, is that my perception?
Well, my feeling is that this is the only time the Guardian Angels have come to Chinatown, and if that's the case, it's really bad.
What do you say? Do you think they're just exploiting the situation?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are exploiting the situation. I've noticed that some of the security murals have been vandalized by taggers, and there's been a number of incidents in which a friend of mine whose wife is Korean was assaulted dropping off her child at school about 8 weeks ago. And my Filipino sister-in-law in San Diego was verbally abused in a shopping mart parking lot.
Yeah, everyone, I think, just by show of hands, if you know of at least one case personally of someone harassed or someone who was told Asian go home, Chinese go home, and that's the thing, I'm a born here, and I'm a, I had to go back to my history books and say, oh, wait a minute, when Wong Kim Ark came, born in San Francisco like me, went to Hong Kong, came back and was refused entry, when he fought that case saying, hey, look, I'm a citizen, that case went to the Supreme Court. That's the basis for us born here's to feel, we're justified. We're Americans. We're, that law is 125 years old this year, and yet someone's coming to me, to white sounding me to say, hey, go home. it's like that is that goes to show you how far we've come with Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. We keep reliving these heritage stories. Like I said, history we forget, heritage, the pain of the history lives on with us. So, Corky,
Well, I hope
do? What are you going to do with all the?
I hope that people will watch the PBS 5-hour documentary series on May 11th and May 12th. It'll cover a lot of material about the history and the struggles of Asian Pacific American Islanders.
And yeah, I'm looking forward to that also. And tell me about what New York City is doing. You said that New York City was, they had a big town hall and like 1,000 people showed up and they wouldn't let people in.
Well, yeah, I felt it was a dog and pony show in which a lot of the officials from New York City basically presented information about what they were doing. But it appears to me that there is a New York State compensation fund for victims, but there's no compensation for hate crime victims. So I think laws need to be written not only in New York State, but probably California and Illinois, where there's a large population of Asian, because if they become victims of hate crimes, there's no compensation for them. But it's for robbery, rape, and assault, but not for hate crimes.
Is there a fear in the community?
Well, yes, I think there is visible fear. People will not come out at night. Chinatown has a lot of senior citizens, so there's also been stir-fry meals on wheels in Brooklyn and other areas. So people are delivering meals to seniors. Homecrest Community Services, which Karen Zhou, she's the executive director of that. And they've been delivering meals for the last, I think it's almost 4 weeks now. So they've run up a tab of about close to $100,000, but they're doing fundraising and delivering meals.
Great. All right. So tomorrow you're going to go take shots of Curtis Sliwa and the Guardian Angels?
Well, Curtis Sliwa probably won't be there, but I really want to photograph Chinese Americans that have been recruited by the Guardian Angels. And there's an auxiliary police patrol, which NYPD has basically suspended. I think that if the Guardian Angels patrol the streets in Chinatown, Brooklyn, and Flushing with uniform Chinese that are wearing uniforms for the NYPD, that would be going towards a greater understanding between Asians, blacks, and Latinos.
What about the idea, though, that it's vigilantism and that might bring out the challenge for people who are anti-Asian to come out and say, okay, show us what you got? I mean, do you fear that might egg on confrontation?
No, I don't think so. I know that there are some Asian American veterans in San Francisco's Chinatown that have been patrolling San Francisco for probably about the last 3 weeks now. So I think a lot of communities will be developing a neighborhood watch. There is another group in New York City's Chinatown comprised of local residents that have been doing a watch, but they do about 2 or 3 days a week. Guardian Angels come in about 2 or 3 days a week, but at different times.
Okay. Well, Corky, I appreciate you coming on. Hang on in here. We're not done yet because I want to go to Seattle to Monique Chow. She's an artistic guardian angel. She is like a one-woman force out there as an artist, and her artistic vision has been used to fight back anti-Asian American harassment in Seattle. Hi, Monique.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
Oh, well, I heard about your story in Randall Yip's Asian Am News, and I was so taken by it because there are so many different responses that you can have to what's going on. You know, some of us are just dumbfounded that it's happening. You know, we don't, so we just are startled and don't know how to react. Some people form little groups, like they hook up with the guardian angels. You had an artistic response. Well, tell us what happened in Seattle. What did you
Yeah.
do?
So I guess I'll give a little bit of background as to like who I am and what I do too, just to help inform like what I've been doing. So I was raised in a Chinese restaurant in the Seattle International District here, which currently like comprises of like a Chinatown. We have a Japantown. There was a lot of history around Manila Town that was erased. And due to like an upzoning in our neighborhood, and then also a little Saigon. So I do a lot of work around my personal identity and what it was like to grow up in Chinatown and what it was like to grow up Asian American. And so like I do a lot of work in this neighborhood. Also, I just wanted to say, Corky, like I'm a really big fan of your work and have been introduced to your work through the Wing Luke Museum, which has been a really big like staple for my growth as a person, as an Asian American, and as an artist. But so I do a lot of work around here. I live and I work in the neighborhood, and so this place is absolutely home to me and has been home to like my grandparents and my parents. And so because of all of this happening, like obviously I'm sure that all Chinatowns have been experiencing a lot of bias and xenophobia even before the virus reached the States. And so I, as like someone who is living here and is constantly like consistently a customer and consumer of all of the businesses here and community member here, like everyone is being affected. And then it's been really like hard to see as like your community is, you know, being disproportionately affected by like, you know, like the resurgence of yellow peril. And so when there was an instance where like someone in my community thread had mentioned that there were a group of like men who were masked and like wearing like heavy sunglasses and like very aggressively like with their presence have been putting up stickers that are they're from a white nationalist group called the Patriot Front, and a lot of them were like better red than dead, and like all of these, like I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but they were very like white centered, and obviously like we're racially charged to be put in that specific our specific neighborhood. So I continued with my work and wanted to make these posters, and I made these posters that are like, they're yellow and red, and they say Chinatown, Filipino town, Little Saigon, like we are all built on resilience, and we will survive this too. And so I wanted to counteract those stickers, and like because some of the public authorities like hadn't taken these stickers down, and so a group of like people have come together with me and like helped me poster all over the neighborhood with all of these like really reassuring posters, and I pasted last weekend, and that's sort of what I've been doing with all of this.
So the posters are, I'll put some on when I post this as a podcast, I'll put it in the podcast info box. But tell me about the website where they can see the posters, because they really unite all the different Asian American communities, ethnic communities that are in the International District.
Totally. So you can actually go to my website. My website for all of my artwork is called ChineseBornAmerican.com, and I have access to like free PDFs that people can download and print themselves. Also, like as I'm being on this call, like I wanted it to offer to all of you, like these posters are like, I was donated a bunch of like really nice prints of them, and so I'd love to share them and share them across like all of the Chinatowns and in America. And I also wanted to preface that like I don't have Koreatown on there or Thai Town, like for the sake, because it was made for specifically like Seattle's Chinatown International District. So apologies for excluding like them as well, but those are also something that I wanted to offer everyone here too.
Now, you're youngish, and this is not your first Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. But is this the first Asian Pacific American Heritage Month that has been somehow, affected by harassment and affected by, uh, the kind of things that you're describing, the stickers and all that?
Yeah, I think that this APA Heritage Month is definitely different from the rest, just because I think that there has been a call to really radicalize a lot of young folks and be more involved. And I think it's very obvious, as we have seen throughout history, when there is something that is so oppressive, that a lot of really beautiful things come out of it. And a lot of communities form and come together out of it. And so even though it feels a lot more stressed and full of hardship, that there is a lot of really beautiful reconnecting and community building, and a lot of Seattle is doing a lot of mutual aid, and there have been intergenerational relationships being built.
Being built, right?
Across the community. And we're, as all Chinatowns are dealing with gentrification, and a lot of private developers are using this opportunity in this global crisis to use it as an opportunity to continue with gentrification, as we are all trying to survive and protect each other. And so even throughout that, I think there's a lot of strength being built, and relationships being built that are completely necessary, and for us to all be on a call together and talking about these experiences. So I think it's been a really difficult one, even though it's the first day of our Heritage Month. It's definitely difficult, but also in a really beautiful way. It is being really strengthened. So I'm really grateful.
Yeah, I mean, it seems odd that we're isolated, but we're forced to address these forces, these external forces that are threatening our isolation for health reasons. And now we have to, expand out of our takeout boxes and say, hey, here we are, this is who we are. And, it just struck me as being very, a kind of, just an emboldened action to take art, a simple piece of art as a poster, and then to counteract those stickers. I applaud you. And I just thought that, boy, that's what we need to see more of. People need to step up where their voices are. For some people it's podcasting or singing or dancing or making art, and we just have to do it. And the point that you make about intergenerational connections, Dan's been a professor at San Francisco State. You teach young Asian Americans in the Asian American Studies department there. Are you seeing in these COVID times, and you teach a lot on Zoom now, because that's all you can teach these days, on Zoom.
It's been almost 2 months. We were one of the first of 3 colleges and universities to move online. Anyway, yeah, it's difficult. Many students, particularly newer immigrants, weren't aware. They're aware of it historically, but it doesn't touch them in immediate life terms. This experience does, and so it brings to life what was only historical and somewhat anecdotal to them. Yeah. And I try to be gentle with it. Obviously, you have to be really sensitive to the possibility that either the students themselves or members of their family or friends have been accosted or assaulted or confronted. And some of those reports are starting to come in now. I have anonymized their responses online so that they're protected. But I think it's going to increase, unfortunately. I just heard from one of my former students who teaches now at Stanford, that Stanford is not only going to go entirely online for the fall, they're talking about planning the academic year in that manner. And I think that's really forward thinking. But given the circumstances, that might be a good idea. I'm still waiting to see what happens with the CSU system and with SF State specifically. But SF State has always been kind of a renegade campus, right? We go our own way a lot.
No.
I'm really concerned for the people who were in denial of the possibility that violence could come of this experience. And there are a lot of people who are in denial of that. So we have two extremes. And one of them was as soon as the first assault started happening, particularly in Southern California, Asian-owned gun shops were doing increased business. They were reporting 30, 40, 50% increase in business. And there were interviews, person on the street interviews of men buying guns and for ostensibly for self-defense. And that's on the one hand. On the other hand, there are people who are saying, you know, you just have to be careful where you go. It's kind of the defensive anticipation, you know, and you have to look at the fact that there's a constant record of conflict around the issue of race. And as was explained by Jim earlier, racism isn't only expressed and in violent terms by white people. Right. It's also expressed by other people of color. And that's completely consistent with my own personal experience and what I continue to witness even in the streets of San Francisco. Yeah. So we have to be on guard, but at the same time, you have to not overreact. And you know, there's two really difficult positions to be in. You know, how can you tell if somebody really means you harm before it's too late, before you actually become the victim of potential violent attack? I wanted to ask Chris Castro, whether or not there are any reports in Stockton of violence against Asians. You're on mute right now. At least that's what I'm seeing.
No, we unmuted him. What do you think, Chris? I haven't heard of any. Have you heard of any?
Nope. See, he looks muted to me, man.
No, he's unmuted. Oh,
there he goes. There he goes.
Hey,
what do you think?
How you doing, Dan?
I'm okay. How about you? Any word about violence there?
Well, you know what? You know, the Stockton record has been, well, Emil ought to know this. You know, it's pretty vanilla, if you will. Okay. You know what? To lack of a better term, and to try to be as realistic as possible. But no, you know what? I haven't heard or seen anything since really I've been shut in, because I read the paper every morning, look at the local news, and would have realized that this was happening because you hear a part of Emil Zoom's meetings. But you know, it sort of harkens back when at the end of the Vietnam War, you remember when we were all getting discharged at the end of Vietnam?
Sure,
and
coming back.
We had, exactly, when we had the influx of Southeast Asians coming and the hatred towards, you know, Laos, Thais, Cambodians, you know, especially in San Jose. And that's where I was at that time. And, you know, it's sort of like that where, you know, I was at the gym. This is just early in March, and a fella I had talked to in the gym about certain things. You know, I try to keep my political thoughts to myself when I'm in a public place, because, you know, when you get old enough, you understand you have to sort of be a soft shoe through this. But the fella, the first thing he said was, "Oh yeah, this stuff's coming from China because these people eat bats."
Yeah. Yep.
I just looked at him and I was so disappointed, because I thought he was a little bit more in tune to what's the reality of the world itself. But, you know, he brought that up. So I knew right off the bat that I had to sort of be, you know, cautious of what I said, just so I could go to the gym and get my workout in and let him, you know, think the way he does, because he's not going to be changed. Because if he feels that is a reality, then, you know, I feel sorry for him. But I would just like to say this, you know, ever since this administration has been there, and, you know, the culprit in all of this is Stephen Miller.
Yeah, and one of the underlying progenitors, yes.
That's all I got to say, because
He's-
you know
he-
what? And he's Californian himself, Southern California.
Yeah,
And
well,
so-
so is Nunez, so is
Oh, yes.
McCarthy. Yeah,
Right.
McCarthy from Southern
But
California.
exactly. Every time I used to drive down on 99 and see that billboard and going through Tulare, you
Right,
know, and I would see
Nunez.
Devin
Oh,
Nunez's billboard on it, I would just wave. And if you know what I mean by wave,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
would just wave.
It was
But
the
no,
single digit wave. Yeah.
Roger that. But you know what I'm just saying is, no, I haven't seen much in the sense of the anti-Asian sentiments. And well, because actually, Chinatown was destroyed with the whole economy in the late 60s and early 70s.
Right.
That was taken out.
Right,
At least in Seattle, where my family lives. Of course, I go to Seattle twice a year. My sister worked right down there for Getty, right down by the railroad station, and the International District, Taitung. I go to Wajimaya's when I'm there in Seattle, and the same in San Francisco, growing up here in Stockton.
Yeah.
I really feel for what's going on now, because, if it wasn't for the Chinese Americans that went to battle, in the 1890s, we would have no immigration system. And it's people who don't learn their history, will soon, forget it.
Well,
But anyway,
like I was saying, you can forget history, you can discard it. The good parts or the bad parts, you remember the good parts. But when it comes to your heritage, you can't discard, you can't, it all comes forward and it becomes internalized. It becomes inherited. This is our inherited past. And so, to get to the question what Dan was saying about what's reported, what's not, what's happening in Stockton, here's the reality about the media. There are things that are reported and there are things that go unreported. And Monyi up in Seattle, how many people talked about the stickers? Did anyone report on the stickers in Seattle?
It's been really difficult, obviously, because there is a lot of distrust with like the police department too. And like, for example, I know that the stickers were reported because it was shared to a community page. And so other people had reported them. But like, for example, like even a friend of mine, who I'll leave unnamed, but they were mugged and racially like targeted. And like, there was a huge discussion amongst like my group chat around like whether or not they should contact the police and let them know, because obviously like calling the police can put a lot of other folks into danger. And so it's been really like conflicting here in terms of like police presence. And also like I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with like public safety around the CID in Seattle. We used to have a local hero named Donnie Chin, who was, I guess, is similar to like the Guardian Angels situation in New York, where we had like CID, like public safety, but there was actually like a murder that happened, and he was the one who for many years like had been like a substitute to police presence in the neighborhood, because we've been historically like ignored by the police. And he was murdered about, I think, 2.5 years or 3 years now. And so like public safety around our neighborhood has been sort of in a struggle at the moment.
But that's important, relationship to the police. And if a community wants to report it, because sometimes the community won't report it, and they'll put it on social media. But I encourage everyone who's experienced anything to report it when you can. And that's the thing, if you get over the threshold level of what's reportable, what they deem is a transgression enough, because a lot of the things are going to be like low-lying things that they won't want to bother with. And that's unfortunate. But one other point that Dan mentioned, and Corky, if you're there, the Guardian, you mentioned with the Guardian Angels in New York that it's an opportunity to get Latino and the Black communities together with the Asian American communities, specifically the Chinese community, to try to fight violence. What do you think? Do you think that really can happen?
Well, it's the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, because that's, you know, what Dan said, that sometimes the perpetrators are other people of color. And we've experienced that all throughout history. I mean, to the point where, you know, sometimes it's like, well, we lived in different communities, Black communities and Hispanic communities, and we got along generally. But, you know, the racism cuts both ways sometimes. And that's one of those areas that we haven't really explored yet. It's all sort of underneath, but we do know that there are instances where we come together, and when we have these months, Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, uh, all the Latino, you know, the Heritage Months for Latinos, Black History Month, it gives us an opportunity to understand and to get to know each other, and then to put COVID on top of this with us. Hey, we are in the same boat, I guess, right, Dan? We can't separate ourselves.
No, one of the things that I was noticing, I watched. There was a national online meeting yesterday that was sponsored by CAM, and some of the tweets that were going by warned that Chinese ought to be on guard, and I tried to respond to tweet, but I was a little too slow. The problem with that is they don't distinguish. People who are going to do a racist attack don't distinguish, man. You can be not at all Asian, but look kind of Asian and be victimized by this. And if you do look like Asian, they don't distinguish, you know. So we have all been victimized for being. I grew up being chinked. I call it being chinked, right? Because they would do the Ching Chong Chinaman thing. You got to be old to remember that poem, right? Remember it? Yeah. Ching Chong Chinaman sitting on a fence trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. They would pull that stuff in the park, man. And my parents had moved into a middle-class neighborhood, lower middle class, you know, working class, middle class neighborhood, right near the park, saying, wow, this is great. You know, you can play right across the street and all that. I was at risk, and they never understood that. They never understood that. You know?
Look, I never have denied my Asianness. In fact, I always thought that, well, ever since I had that crush on Brenda Okawachi, who turns out to be from, she turned out to be from Okinawa. She was Okinawan. But she was a neighbor when I lived in the Fillmore district, which was traditionally Black in San Francisco. So I always, you know, connected to, you know, related to diversity. But, you know, we had, there's always been issues. I don't know. I just think that how are we going to pull out of this? This is 2020. We're supposed to be able to pull out of this. Monique in Seattle, you know, this is the new generation, right? The new generation seems to be bringing us back.
But if I may.
Oh, go ahead.
You know, and being as like Emil and myself, Emil's on the board of the Fonz Museum in Stockton, and I'm a volunteer there. You know, history repeats itself. That's why if we, as people of, exactly, as people of diversity, should be students of history, because it repeats itself. And it's good for the younger generation to realize that, hey, it's alive and well. And I feel sorry that for the people in Wuhan that it happened there. But hey, think about if it would have happened in Manila.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well,
hey, people like me who have a last name like Castro, and they think, oh, wow, the guy's Mexican because I'm mestizo. But hey.
But look at the three Filipinos here, Castro, Guillermo, and Gonzalez. You know, we're not Asian. We're ass panics. Right?
But my freaking eyes give it all away, dude.
Yeah. Well, mine too.
I can't cheat that one.
Mine too. And I wear the glasses.
But when I was in grade school in Gilroy, and I got on the bus in first grade, in Gilroy, me and my brother were the only kids of color riding on that bus. Whoa. And guess who got called? it was me, because my grandfather named me Insick when I was a kid.
I know what that means.
And so, well,
For
but
Monyi,
anyway,
that means Chinaman.
exactly.
No.
Okay, yes, because, but anyway, and so there's kids, he started doing that little rhyme, ching chong. And I remember my grandmother, who spent 5 years in the plantation in Hawaii, taught us to stick up for ourselves. Hey, when I punched that kid and I got to sit in the front of the bus and I got in trouble my first day in school. And, you know, I learned
Yeah,
when
but
I
you
went
had street
home.
cred, man.
Oh, well, you know what? Hey, I grew up in the projects in Stockton. So you know what? If somebody were to say something to you, there was only one recourse. So, but what I'm getting at is this. That's why it's sad to think of this as happening, but it's a lesson in history. Don't forget.
All right, Christopher Castro, the original Filipino guardian angel in Gilroy. So Monyi, I want to hear from you, Monyi, about the younger generation, since we're all old guys here. We're all the OGs.
Speak for yourself, man.
Okay, all right. But what's happening with the younger people? Are they embracing diversity? I used to think that, yeah, you know, that we're all gonna be all mixed and we're fall in love with each other. And that's what I thought 20 years ago, right? And there is a mixed Asian crowd, but I don't know. Where are we? We're going forward. Asian Pacific American Heritage Months of the future. Where are we?
Yeah, I think we're doing pretty good. As I said earlier, you know, like a lot of people are being radicalized, and I think because we have to at this point, for us to survive and for us to be able to thrive in our communities, like we have to, you know, make sure that everyone is included and have international solidarity with everybody. And so I think with the groups that I've been involved in, like organizing groups, like I'm involved with Parasol, which is Pacific Rim Solidarity Network. And we consider ourselves as the Chinese rejects that come together and work through our diaspora together and work on prison abolition and public safety within our neighborhoods and solidarity with elders, and how can we support our elders, and how can we make sure that young kids don't feel for example, I went to an event with a bunch of Native artists, and one of them is a teacher, and she talked about how her children and her students they are experiencing the Native experience every day within their lives, and how because we're going through the struggle of identity politics right now, that hopefully down the road my work about identity becomes irrelevant. That's literally the goal, is for people to be able to understand that you don't have to go through that struggle because that's something I experienced, and I'm sure is not an uncommon narrative with folks of color in terms of wanting to assimilate, and so trying to hide how Chinese you are, but as Dan said, obviously I can't hide that in any way. And so I think there's a lot of learning and growth, and I'm 24 years old, and I still do a lot of work with youth, and they still they're so radical. I don't even, it's really surprising, and it's really great to see how they I learned so much from the elders in my life, but I also learned so much from the youth in my life. And I think that's where that community building is really powerful and strong. And so I'm really excited for what the people around me are doing and what younger folks are doing. And for you guys also to host a conversation around that subject too. So I feel it's really good. It's been really nice to see everyone coming together in this neighborhood. And in Seattle we have, I don't really know what it's across where you all are in terms of mutual aid, but even with, there's an artist mutual aid group, and so being able to see the intersections of being Asian American as an artist too is seeing all these communities come together and support each other. So yeah.
Could you describe what you mean by radical when you talk about youth? And can you describe that in in more specific terms? I hate to get behavioral on you, but
that's okay.
Yeah.
It's been like people who are really more involved in community work, and like people who are working towards like ideologies that I never understood or when I was growing up. So in terms of like talking about disability justice, like that's a big conversation that's happening right now, right? With everything becoming virtual and more accessible to like make sure that we can all access these things through like having a conversation with all of you. So like when they talk about like political theory and action and being really involved, like that's what like radicalizing means to me, and becoming an activist at such a young age and like working towards like solidarity with multiple groups. So
Monique, why is it that you are this way versus the people that we hear about in mainstream, the model minorities who are going off to college and corporate jobs and making money and going that route? I mean, clearly, me and you are on a different kind of path on a different kind of way, but there are people who are just go high tech, make $1 million, that kind of thing. What was the thing that made you decide that this is your life? This is the way, this is the way you're going to live your life?
I think that's also a complicated, like, and layered answer to that, just because like I am the very first like person in my family line to be able to have the opportunity to go to college. I went to school and I have a degree in visual and fine art. But also I work for the government. So I'm actually at work right now where I work for the Office of Arts and Culture. But I also am still doing all of this like activist work and artist work because it's really important for me to protect this neighborhood. And I knew that like my life fell into place and where I should be when I started making work about like the lineage of like where I came from, and like acknowledging the labor of like my grandparents and what it took for them to be able to make sure that their future generations could have a like secure and like better future. And so like that's a lot of what like the American dream like ideology is, right? Is for me to be able to come here and get an education, but also like I'm fighting for like the resiliency of this neighborhood because our histories are not talked about enough. Like, I really think about like curriculum and history. Like I was never good at history in school, but that's because we never talked about people who looked like us. Right. And so like, especially like, Japanese internment was maybe a paragraph in my like entire history curriculum. And the Chinese Exclusion Act was maybe a sentence. And so like for me not to know those things and know about what happened to my people, like I had to go out and find that information for myself. And so like I wanted to make sure that that was not something that died, right? And goes back to what Christopher was saying, is that like if we don't know our history, like we are bound to repeat it. And our history is really ugly here. And so like we want to like make sure that we can, have a place for everybody and make sure that there is access for everybody and that we can all thrive and survive together. And so like my work really comes from like appreciating the work that my grandparents did to make sure that I could learn all these things and have a voice for myself and protect this neighborhood. And so like, as much as like I can still like, climb a complicated corporate ladder so that I can still have a voice at the table, like I will still fight for like all the elders and all the youth and like for all the people who don't have a chance to sit at that table. Like that's really, really important to me.
Well, that's important.
What was your major? I'm sorry.
Emil. I was just saying that's important motivation. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, what was your major?
I went to Cornish College of the Arts, so I have a major in, I have a bachelor's in fine art.
And you got a gig working for the government in which department? I thought you said agriculture.
No, I work for the city of, I work for the city of Seattle for the Office of Arts and Culture.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And she has a major appreciation of the work of Corky Lee.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to get that straight.
Is that right, Corky? I mean, you've worked with the Wing Luke, right?
Yes, I have donated photographs, and Karen Joe actually has some photographs of Vietnamese in New Orleans around the time of Hurricane Katrina.
Uh-huh.
That that I think has been extended. But I think the one important thing about why celebrate Asian Pacific Heritage Month is the fact that we need to get it into grade schools, K through 12. Okay, the textbooks need to, expand more than one sentence about the Chinese Exclusion Act or a paragraph about Japanese American internment camps. Okay, and I think that that in itself would probably help to bring our understanding and white America's understanding as to our contributions and our struggles.
Well, yeah, I look at. I was a history major, but in my history book in high school, I went to a pretty good Lowell High School in San Francisco. One paragraph on Emilio Aguinaldo, right, the first president, first republic of the Philippines. Just one, as the leader of this Philippine. I guess they called it the insurrection, I believe, but it was the war after the Spanish-American War, and I think the whole Spanish-American War plus the Philippine-U.S. War, a page maybe, with the Filipinos getting maybe a paragraph, and that really kicked off the whole colonization of Filipinos. Dan, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to get more history in there?
Well, there's a bill up, right?
Yeah.
In California, but it's being contested, and it's being contested in a really interesting way. Essentially, it's being contested by groups like the JADL. And they're saying that the way that ethnic studies is discussing, for example, conflicts involving people of Arab and Muslim descent, point the finger at prejudice and racialization of the issue, and it makes Jewish people look bad. And so they're actually filing injunctions.
Really?
Against, yeah.
So,
and they have been, Jewish organizations have been, to be completely fair, persecuting Palestinian professors. And that's true right on the San Francisco State College University campus. And it's happened to one of my close colleagues. And it took them almost 3 years to finally get it clear from court. And the judgment went against the pro-Israeli Jewish groups. And so they have an extremely well-endowed chair at San Francisco State. They're sitting on at least a couple of million right now.
So the
as
politics
opposed to Ahmed studies, Arab and Muslim ethnic diaspora studies, right? Which is moving from day to day, which is still underfunded now from faculty position point of view. Palestinian grocers have problems in the city, believe it or not, even though they've been in business, some of them for almost 50 years.
San Francisco.
So that Middle Eastern issue is also a domestic issue here in the United States, and then it becomes an issue that is conflagrated with the problem of a lack of ethnic studies. And so it's being held back on that basis. It's really ridiculous, frankly.
Well, it certainly is complicated. I guess there is no simple answer to some of these questions, because it leads into all these other things. Like when you mentioned the JDL, I knew, this is going to be a long answer, because it's complicated. It's complicated.
It is.
But the key is we need more history. We need Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. We need discussions like this so they at least come out and we hear and we talk to each other. And we're getting to the point where I think it's time to close our session. And before I do, I just want to thank all of you. I want to give you all a chance to have a final 30-second say. Let us begin with Monyi in Seattle. Monyi, thank you for just being the artistic voice, the youth voice, also the voice of someone who had an artistic response to all the anti-Asian stuff that you saw in your life in Seattle. I'll give you 30 seconds to say whatever you want about Asian Pacific American Heritage Month or anything. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just really happy to be having these conversations and to be you know, sharing this space with other folks who are in this fight as well. Please, like, I'd love to send posters out to you guys if you want to get in contact with me. I'm not charging anything for these posters, and I have been, like, it's been really sweet for people to donate a lot of posters. So I'd love to share them and share, like, that statement of resilience with all of you if you allow me to. So
Great.
yeah.
I'll share your contact with all of them. Manu Chao, thank you very much up there in Seattle. Christopher Castro, I'll give you 30 seconds to say what you want.
Okay, good. You know, it's just been, I'm just thankful that you've done this, Emil, and, you know, given us the Fonz Museum and those of us here in Stockton, this, you've given us the rest of the world, if you will. You know, but, you know, for the young people, you know what? It's your time. You know, it's your time. So you have to, you know, carry the load now. But for all of us that are still around here and we can pass on what we've gained, because I've been around a little bit, you get white hair being around for a while. That's why, you know, I like doing the volunteer work, because it's being around the young people and seeing that there's hope. Because I remember when I was young, you know, we weren't we weren't looked upon too well either. So, you know what, keep the fight up. So, hey, we're here to listen, and I'll pass it on as soon as we open back up again.
Yeah, we'll get it up in the museum for sure. Christopher Castro in Stockton. Let's go to Corky Lee in New York. Corky, I thank you for being here. I know you're going to be with the Guardian Angels taking pictures of the Chinese American recruits on the Angels with the Angels tomorrow, walking through Chinatown. I'll give you 30 seconds to say what you want, just to close, and about Asian Pacific American Heritage Month or whatever. Go ahead, Corky.
Well, I think that the PBS 5-hour documentary series is a landmark for Asian Americans, because this is the first time that PBS has allowed Asian American filmmakers to tell our stories ourselves. So May 11th and May 12th, I hope people will tune in and then get the word out before that, and have much wider discussions. And you know, I think the last couple of words would be dare to struggle, dare to win.
Corky, you know, you know how much I love and adore you, even with your beard now. And I know that it was a key moment when I bonded with you, and that's when it was at an Asian American Journalists Association convention in LA, and the keynote speaker was Connie Chung, and I had a question for Connie Chung, and I was a little timid, and I didn't want to get up there and ask her a question, but I'll never forget how you kind of gave me a little push out in front to ask Connie the question about what took her so long and why she was so reticent to be part of the community, which changed the tenor of her speech and the tenor of that meeting in front of the Asian American Journalists Convention. It also changed a lot of relationships that people had toward me. Not all for the good, but we became much friendlier. And
yes, I remember photographing you and Connie.
oh yeah, and even years later. But no, you're always a fighter. You're always there for the struggle. I appreciate you coming on to the program to talk to people like your admirer, Moni Chao in Seattle. It means a lot that you're here. So thank you, Corky. And in New York, good luck with the Guardian Angels. And now we'll give another 30 seconds to Daniel Phil Gonzalez, another guy I've known a long time, Asian American studies professor at San Francisco State, and really a tremendous resource for all Asian Americanists, all Filipino Americanists. Dan, what are some of your thoughts to wrap up here? Asian Pacific.
Well, first of all, thanks for doing this, Emil. And I really appreciated what everybody had to contribute today. It's wonderful to see Chris online. I've been seeing him, unfortunately, at too many funerals the last couple of years. And as far as Corky is concerned, yeah, you know, I'm an Asian American Journalists Association dropout, and so I haven't seen Corky in a long time. The last time I remember is like the 1980s, right around 87 or something. But it's also good to hear from you. Mon Yi, you inspire me. You remind me a lot of our best that are coming out of San Francisco in the Daly City area right now. We're showing a lot more political activity in your generation, and that's what gets people elected. They're all talking about voting and not. That's probably the silver lining to all of this stuff. Trumpism, anti-Trumpism, and the COVID-19 situation have actually accelerated political interest. And I hope that that continues beyond the crisis itself. So we're here to help. We're not just witnesses to history and past makers of history in many instances. We're also recorders of history like Corky, and preservers of history like the people of Fonz. So it was great to meet you, and I'm looking forward to seeing the posters. And everybody, right on, right on.
Yeah.
Oh, build coalitions. It's got to be real.
Yeah.
It's got to be real.
Build coalitions. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, look, I was going to ask you your favorite COVID story, but you've already told me about what makes this Asian Pacific American Heritage Month so special, so different. To close, I just want to say, for me, it's this real. I've been writing columns about Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, like I said, as Emil Amok for 25 years. But this is the first time I've really thought about heritage. Like I said, history, you learn it, you don't learn it, you're exposed to it, you're not exposed to it. But the heritage part, what is it about our heritage? And yeah, it's about our food, it's about our stories, it's about our songs, it's about our documentaries, how we tell our stories. But our heritage is inherited. And what is it about? I guess it's the good and the bad parts of history are inherited and we take with us. And we save and learn from the good parts, and we overcome and try to change the bad parts. But it's part of our genetics going forward. And hopefully we'll have the willpower, we'll have the gumption and the courage to fight internally, fight all those external forces that try to redirect our lives and try to redirect us and try to tell us who we are as Asian Pacific Americans. We know who we are internally. And then when we're strong, we know that to be true, and we will find our paths, we'll find our truths. So thank you very much, all of you, for being part of this Emil Amok's Lumpia party. You know, we're all here, you know, whether it's imperial roll, egg roll, or lumpia, you know, crispy or, you know.
That's another argument, man. Don't bring up that stuff.
Okay, all right. We'll say that for another
You're making me hungry.
That's going to turn ethno-nationalistic on us in a second, man.
We'll save that for another conversation. I love you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emil.
Oh, thank you, Corky. That's Emil Amok's Takeout. I'll put it out as Emil Amok's Takeout, the podcast. Shortly, I'll put it up on the ALDEF site, Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund site, and I'll put this massive recording, which is on Facebook Live, but which will also be ending. I'll put it up there, and I'll tell you where you can. I'll try to index it so people can see our interview with the essential Asian American, the nurse, Jem Scorp, and all the others who are here with us. But thank you again. Have a great Asia. Remember, we have a whole month. Asian Pacific American Heritage Month.
First day of the month. Yep.
First day.
That's it. That's it.
Right.
All right. All power, folks.
All right. Right on.
Thanks to you all.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, everybody.
Bye-bye. Be well.
All right.
Bye now.
See you,